There are two terms in the Bible, the Son of Man and the Son of God. And these terms have to be looked at inside the context of the Bible and the Bible's narrative. And when we look at that, the Son of Man, if you unlike that in the Hebrew, is saying the son of Adam. The Son of Man would have been anyone that is in the bloodline of Adam, who was the father of Mesopotamia, not the first human of the whole wide world. So this Son of Man, in reflection of, say, the book of Daniel, when it's talking, referring to, oh, the Son of Man, the Son of Man, it's referring to like this Davidic kingship that the covenant people was under. And in that, you would have the Son of Man being addressed. Now, the Son of God was a little bit different. This is a terminology that they would have used for the headship of the whole body of Adam, the collective body of Adam. And in that regards, it would have been the Messiah, the one that was the priest king, right? And so this is where we have the Son of God. Now, when you thread that, the Son of God phraseology into the other ancient texts or the ancient culture of its time, you have God kings represented in the ancient world throughout all of the cultures. And people at that time believed that if you were a king, you were appointed by God. You had to be for you to be legit. Now, there were some bloodlines that you would have to follow as well, but definitely you were considered like this God king, in that they would give you this position or authority or honor that's due, like almost of a divine type of position or character, right? They would give you that attribute. That does not mean that when they use the term Son of God, that they actually literally believe that this person was God, right? A divine figure, a form of deity. That was just the way that the ancients talked about giving very high honor to those that would have been in that structure of leadership for a city-state, for a kingdom, for an empire, you name it. And so in our history, we have that where people are, thought of as a godlike figure. We sort of have that in our American culture of stars and how people worship stars. Why do we call them stars? They're high up in the celestial places, shining brightly, right? This too comes from that backdrop and that background of where where we have come from in human consciousness of recognizing, people in these high leadership and positions, they're like stars, or they are close to God, they are divine. And so when we look at this context and we look at the Son of God motif and we see how that was used on behalf of Jesus, it totally makes sense, because in his time and in his culture, everyone used that terminology. And so when you're looking at Augustus, the first Roman emperor that comes on the scene, they called him the Son of God, and they gave him that deification position. Did they believe that he came out of heaven and that he was God? No, it was just the culture of that time. So I'd like to challenge this view that, in Christianity, in Christendom, that we believe that Jesus was claiming to be God, when in all the texts of Jesus' sayings, he does say, I am not God, but I came from the Father, and that I am one with God. That's very different than saying that he is God. In fact, in the Jewish mindset, there is no way that anyone could be God except for God himself, right? It was just very blasphemous for someone to, claim some kind of affinity or union or oneness with God, which Jesus was doing. And the Jewish leadership, the Sanhedrin, believed that he was that, narcissistic to think that he was of God. And that was the debate that they were having. But as you then, move forward into Christianity and Christendom, you're moving into a time frame post 300 AD, when Constantine comes on the scene, where you're now in the Greco-Roman culture. And the Greco-Roman culture is nothing compared to the Hebraic ancient Near Eastern culture. And so they're going to be putting upon this story of Jesus, this notion of, okay, Jesus was God as well, because they had that in their culture. So it makes sense that it would just flow in that way. But we've been so severed from that historical viewpoint that we just hear in church, or the pastor says this or that, and we read it in the Bible and it says Son of God. We're taking that literally when we should not. We should be reading that in the context of the biblical worldview, of the cosmological view of the ancient Near East, of the time frame of the Greco-Roman world in the New Testament. And when you do all of that research in that background, you then begin to realize who Jesus was, and that absolutely he was a son of man. He was in the bloodline of Adam, the covenant people. And absolutely he was the Son of God, because he came proclaiming that he was the Messiah. He says that to the Samaritan woman at the well. I am he. He directly says that, but he nowhere does he ever say that he is God. Now, the kind of view that I am sharing with you today, yes, it is more towards a Unitarian view of who Jesus is, and that there is only one God, folks, and that is Father God. There is only one God. In fact, in Deuteronomy, in the scriptures, it says, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. In a time frame where there's multiple gods, polytheism, you have this group of people that rises in that time frame to say, no, there is just only one God. And that was very unique and very rare for what they were being called out of darkness, being called out of the chaos of that known world, and to be that light, a kingdom of priests, a kingdom of priesthood. It says in Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, that they were to become this mediatorship of that known world so that people could know who God really was, and that he was not polytheistic, but rather that he was monotheistic, and that there is only one. So for Jesus to come in that vein of his own culture, and then to say, no, Jesus claimed that he was God, or that he was God, that will be completely going against everything that the Bible stood for. And so Jesus, yes, was a son of man, was a son of God, because he was claiming that he was King David, coming into that lineage in Psalms chapter 2. But that does not mean that Jesus was saying that he himself believed he was God, that he was equal to God, that he was one with God. No. In fact, what Jesus was showing the people there, as well as to us today, is that he was an archetype. He was a type. He was a type of figure where he had come into union with God, and he knew God. Gnosos. He was intimate with God, that he had experienced God, that he had studied him in the Torah and the Tanakh and the scriptures, that he came under that teaching and he experienced God in this way. And so therefore he was that representation of God to us, and we can see God's character through Jesus and through his teachings. And in that way, Jesus is supreme. He is supreme above all, I believe, any spiritual figurehead or, persona. And so Jesus' name is above all names in that context, in that way. But is Jesus physically, spiritually God himself? Did he ever claim that? No. How are we to approach Jesus then today? Well, we see him as a type. He is an archetype, and that any human can enter into this personal relationship with God, and that there is nothing separating us from the Father. And when we realize that, when we just come to a point of realization and we enter into this, relationship with Father, he then begins to reveal himself in ways that maybe, we never thought of, but he does. And through that walking out of trusting and building trust with him, we now are are moving into a relationship in spirit and in truth. And through that, we can recognize and we can see that we are walking in the path of how Yeshua, of how Jesus entered into a relationship with the Father. And Jesus shows us that way. And we too can look at that example as an archetype and begin to walk in that way. What do you mean, Mercy? Walk in what way? Obey the Torah, obey the Tanakh, do all of these rituals, do all of the feasts, do all of these things? No, just come into relationship, an honest, transparent, be naked and ashamed, be naked and unashamed, meaning that there's nothing between you and God, and begin to walk that out. It's that simple, folks. And so for me, yes, Jesus is very important. He is that Messiah figurehead of the Bible, and for his people. But for us today, we can look at him and say, yes, he is that model of a perfect human coming into relationship with a perfect God and then coming into that union place.